Professor Eliza Morgan ran her fingers through her graying hair as she stared at the ancient photograph. The university's history department had received a donation of artifacts from a recently demolished mansion in Charleston's historic district, and this particular item had caught her attention immediately. "James, come look at this," she called to her research assistant. The tall, lanky PhD student peered over her shoulder at the sepia-toned image. 5 young women in Victorian-era dresses stood rigidly before the camera, their faces bearing the serious expressions common in 19th-century photography. "What am I looking at?" James asked, adjusting his glasses. "The Harwood sisters," Eliza whispered, almost reverently. "Charleston's forgotten tragedy. I've read accounts, but I've never seen a photograph. This was taken in 1887, just weeks before they all disappeared." The photograph was remarkably well preserved, protected in an ornate silver frame that had tarnished with age. The 5 sisters, ranging from what appeared to be 16 to perhaps 25, stood in a semicircle. Their dark dresses contrasted sharply with the pale backdrop. "Let's get this digitized," Eliza said. "I want to see if we can enhance some of the details. There might be clues about what happened to them." The mystery of the Harwood sisters had fascinated Eliza since her undergraduate days. 5 daughters of one of Charleston's wealthiest families, all vanished within a single night in autumn of 1887. No bodies were ever found. No explanations ever discovered. The family fortune, rumored to include extensive property holdings and a collection of rare jewels, seemingly disappeared along with them. Later that afternoon, in the digital imaging lab, technician Marcus Chen carefully placed the photograph on the scanner. "This is in remarkable condition," he commented. "Where did you say it came from?" "The old Blackwood property on East Bay Street," James replied. "It was hidden in a wall safe they found during demolition." Marcus nodded as he made adjustments to the scanner settings. "Strange place to keep a family photo." "Unless someone wanted it hidden," Eliza suggested, watching the computer screen as the high-resolution scan appeared. The initial image was striking in its clarity. Despite being over a century old, the photograph retained exceptional detail. The sisters' faces came into sharp focus, their eyes dark and penetrating, staring directly into the camera lens. "Can you enhance it further?" Eliza asked, leaning closer to the screen. "Sure," Marcus replied, his fingers dancing across the keyboard. "I'll run it through our restoration algorithm. It'll clean up any damage and sharpen the details." The screen flickered momentarily as the program processed the image. When it refreshed, all 3 researchers took an involuntary step back. "What the hell?" James whispered. The enhanced image had revealed something none of them had noticed in the original photograph. Behind the 5 sisters, barely visible in the shadows of what appeared to be a drawing room, stood a 6th figure, tall, indistinct, its features blurred as if in motion when the photograph was taken. "That's not possible," Marcus said, adjusting his glasses. The exposure time for photographs in the 1880s was several seconds. No one could move that quickly and leave only that kind of blur. Eliza felt a chill run down her spine. "Can you enhance just that section?" Marcus nodded, selecting the area behind the sisters and applying additional processing. The image pixelated, then sharpened. The figure remained blurred, but its outline became more distinct, unnaturally tall, thin, with elongated limbs that seemed to reach toward the unsuspecting sisters. "Print this," Eliza said firmly. "I want physical copies of both the original scan and this enhanced version." As the printer hummed to life, Eliza's phone chimed with a text message. It was from Dr. Harriet Collins, the department chair. "Interesting timing," Eliza murmured, reading the message aloud. "The Harwood mansion is being opened for renovation. The Historical Society got a grant to restore it as a museum. Harriet wants to know if we'd like to visit tomorrow morning." "The Harwood mansion?" James asked. "I thought it burned down in the early 1900s. "The main house did," Eliza confirmed, "but the guest house remained." It's been abandoned for decades. Preservation orders prevented demolition, but no one had the money to restore it until now. The printer finished its task, and Marcus handed the prints to Eliza. She studied the enhanced image, focusing on the mysterious figure lurking behind the sisters. "We should go," she decided. "Maybe there are more photographs or documents that could explain what happened to them." She couldn't tear her eyes away from the strange, elongated figure in the background. Something about it seemed aware, as if it knew it was being captured in the photograph. That night, Eliza couldn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen table, the enhanced photograph spread before her. The 5 sisters stared back: Caroline, Margaret, Elizabeth, Anne, and young Rebecca Harwood, according to the historical records. Their faces seemed to hold secrets, their eyes containing a knowledge of their impending fate. The 6th figure bothered her most. It didn't belong, it couldn't be there, and yet the digital enhancement had revealed it clearly. No photographic trickery of the 1880s could explain its presence. At 3:17 a.m., Eliza finally dozed off at her table, her head resting on her arms beside the photograph. She dreamed of the Harwood sisters, walking through the rooms of their mansion, whispering to each other. In her dream, they turned to look at her, their eyes black and empty, their mouths moving in unison. "He's still there. He's always there." She awoke with a start at 6:45 a.m., her neck stiff and a strange metallic taste in her mouth. The photograph lay where she had left it, but something seemed different. She stared at it, trying to identify what had changed. Then she realized the positions of the sisters had subtly shifted. Where before they had stood in a perfect semicircle, now they appeared to have moved slightly away from the blurred figure, as if attempting to escape its reach. "That's impossible," Eliza whispered to herself, rubbing her eyes. She was overtired, imagining things. Photographs don't change. Yet when she looked again, she couldn't shake the certainty that the image was different from what she remembered. Heart racing, she pulled out her phone and compared the printed photograph to the digital image she'd saved. They were identical. Her mind was playing tricks on her. Later that morning, Eliza met James and Dr. Collins outside the Harwood guest house. The small mansion stood at the end of a tree-lined drive, its once grand facade now weathered and crumbling. Scaffolding surrounded parts of the structure, and a construction trailer had been set up nearby. "The Historical Society only got access last week," Dr. Collins explained as they approached. "The place has been sealed up tight since the 1950s when the last owner died. Some distant Harwood relative who never actually lived here." A woman in a hard hat approached, clipboard in hand. "Dr. Collins, I'm Rebecca Fletcher from the Historical Society. Welcome to Harwood House." Eliza felt a chill at the name Rebecca, the same as the youngest Harwood sister. "We've only just started the inventory," Rebecca continued, leading them toward the house. "But we've found some fascinating items. The place is a time capsule." The interior of the guest house was dark and musty. Sheets covered the furniture, and dust lay thick on every surface. Sunlight filtered through dirty windows, creating beams of light that illuminated swirling dust particles. "The main house was much grander, of course," Rebecca explained. "This was built for extended family and important guests. After the sisters disappeared and the parents died, the property passed through several hands. When the main house burned in 1904, this place was abandoned." She led them to what had once been a study. Bookshelves lined the walls, and a massive oak desk dominated the center of the room. On the desk lay several leather-bound journals and a stack of photographs. "We found these yesterday," Rebecca said, gesturing to the items. "Diaries belonging to Elizabeth Harwood, the middle sister, and some family photographs. I thought your department might help us analyze them." Eliza approached the desk, drawn to the photographs. Most were typical family portraits of the era, showing the Harwood parents and daughters in various formal poses. Then she saw it, an exact duplicate of the photograph they'd found in the Blackwood mansion. "This is remarkable," she said, picking it up carefully. We found an identical print just yesterday in another property across town. Rebecca looked surprised. That's odd. From what we've discovered, the Harwoods were quite private. They wouldn't have distributed family photographs widely. Eliza turned the photograph over. On the back, written in faded brown ink, were the words, "He follows us, still. God help us all." "James," Eliza called, her voice unsteady, "look at this." Her assistant came to her side, reading the inscription. His face paled. "The figure in the background," he whispered. "What figure?" Rebecca asked, looking over their shoulders at the photograph. Eliza and James exchanged glances. In the original, unenhanced photograph, the sixth figure was nearly invisible, just a slight darkening in the shadows that could easily be overlooked. "We digitally enhanced this image yesterday," Eliza explained. "There appears to be someone or something standing behind the sisters." Rebecca frowned, squinting at the photograph. "I don't see anything." "It's subtle," James said. "But once the image is enhanced, it's unmistakable." Dr. Collins joined them, examining the photograph. "We should take these materials back to the university for proper study," she suggested. "The diaries might give us insight into what happened to the family." Rebecca nodded. "That's why I called you. The Historical Society wants to tell their story accurately in the museum. These girls deserve to be remembered." As they gathered the materials, Eliza felt a growing unease. The inscription on the back of the photograph haunted her. "He follows us still." Who or what had followed the Harwood sisters? And was it connected to their disappearance? Back at the university lab, Eliza and James carefully digitized Elizabeth Harwood's diaries. The middle sister had kept detailed records of daily life, writing in a neat, flowing script about social engagements, family matters, and her hopes for marriage. The early entries were mundane, but as Eliza read through the digital scans, she noticed a change in tone, beginning in June 1887, some 4 months before the sisters vanished. June 18th, 1887. "Father has engaged a new photographer to take our portrait next month. He insists we need an updated family image for the drawing room." Margaret protested, saying she dislikes how she appears in photographs, but Father was insistent. "The man comes highly recommended, though his name escapes me now. Some foreign gentleman newly arrived in Charleston. July 3rd, 1887. The photographer visited today to assess the lighting in our drawing room. Mr. Blackwood, that is his name, is an unusual man. Tall and thin, with the palest complexion I have ever seen. He speaks little but observes much. Rebecca says he reminds her of a spider, the way his fingers move across his equipment. I found this comparison distasteful, though not entirely inaccurate." July 15th, 1887. Our portrait was taken today. The process was lengthy and uncomfortable. Mr. Blackwood insisted we remain perfectly still for what seemed an eternity. His camera was like none I have seen before, larger and more complex, with numerous lenses and attachments. When the exposure was complete, he thanked us formally, but did not smile. As he was packing his equipment, I noticed him watching Rebecca with peculiar intensity. "I shall speak to Father about this. I do not wish Mr. Blackwood to return to our home." Eliza paused in her reading, a cold sensation spreading through her chest. Blackwood. The photograph they'd found had been hidden in the Blackwood mansion. It couldn't be coincidence. She continued reading, skipping ahead to entries in the weeks before the disappearance. September 30th, 1887. The portrait Mr. Blackwood created has been delivered and hung in the drawing room. I find I cannot look at it directly. There is something wrong with the image, though I cannot explain what disturbs me so. Caroline says I am being fanciful, but I have noticed she avoids the drawing room now. October 5th, 1887. Rebecca has fallen ill. She wakes screaming in the night, claiming that someone is standing over her bed, a tall, thin man who watches her with hungry eyes. Mother has called for Dr. Hayes, but his medicines do nothing to calm her fears. I have taken to sleeping in her room, though I find I cannot rest. The shadows seem deeper there, as if they conceal something just beyond sight. October 12th, 1887, I saw him today. Standing in the garden beneath Rebecca's window, just as she described, impossibly tall and thin, still as a statue. When I blinked, he was gone. I told no one for fear they would think me as hysterical as poor Rebecca. But tonight, I shall lock my door. October 17th, 1887. We are all seeing him now. Anne encountered him on the stairs last evening. Margaret in the library this morning. Caroline refuses to acknowledge these events, but I observe how she carries a small silver letter opener at all times now. Mother and father know nothing, or if they do, they say nothing. I have noticed father spends more time in his study with the liquor cabinet, while mother takes increasing amounts of her nerve tonic. The portrait in the drawing room fills me with dread. In certain light, I swear, there is a figure standing behind us that was not there when the photograph was taken. The final entry was dated October 21st, 1887, the day before the sisters disappeared. October 21st, 1887. He is in the house now. We hear him moving in the walls, in the spaces between rooms. Rebecca's condition worsens. She has not spoken in 2 days, merely stares at the corner of her room where the shadows are deepest. I suggested to father that we destroy the portrait, as its arrival seems connected to our torment, but he refused, calling me superstitious and foolish. Caroline, ever practical, has suggested we leave Charleston, perhaps visit our cousins in Boston until this strangeness passes. We shall depart tomorrow night, all 5 of us, though we have told no one of our plans, not even our parents. I pray it will be enough. The diary ended there. Whatever happened the following night remained unrecorded. According to historical accounts, the sisters were discovered missing at breakfast on October 23rd. Their beds had not been slept in, and there was no sign of forced entry or struggle. They had simply vanished, along with a small valise belonging to Caroline, and peculiarly, the family portrait from the drawing room. James, Eliza called, her voice tight. The photographer's name was Blackwood, the same name as the mansion where we found the first photograph. James looked up from the journal he was analyzing. That can't be coincidence. No, Eliza agreed, and listen to this description, tall, thin, pale. It matches the figure we enhanced in the photograph. She pulled up the enhanced image on her computer screen. The elongated figure behind the sisters seemed to have gained definition since she last viewed it, as if the enhancement algorithm was still working, gradually revealing more detail. This doesn't make sense, James said, coming to look over her shoulder. We finalized this image yesterday, yet the figure was clearer now. A tall, gaunt man in dark clothing, his face still blurred, but his posture suggesting he was reaching toward the youngest sister, Rebecca. Run the enhancement again, Eliza instructed, a tremor in her voice. James complied, selecting the figure and applying additional processing. The computer hummed, working through the complex algorithms. When the image refreshed, both researchers gasped. The figure had resolved into a man of unnatural height, his limbs too long, his fingers extending like claws toward Rebecca Harwood's shoulder. His face remained obscured, not by blurring now, but by what appeared to be a camera cloth, the type photographers of the era would use to cover their heads when operating their equipment. Print it, Eliza whispered. Print it now. As the new enhancement printed, Eliza turned back to Elizabeth's diary entries. The sisters had planned to flee on October 22nd. They had disappeared that very night. But something didn't add up. If they were planning to escape, why would the portrait be missing too? She wondered aloud. Maybe they took it as evidence, James suggested. Or maybe someone else took it, Eliza countered. Someone who didn't want others to see what was captured in the image. She picked up the newly printed enhancement, studying the photographer's shrouded form. We need to find out more about this Blackwood character. A search of historical records revealed little. There was no registered photographer named Blackwood operating in Charleston in the 1880s. The Blackwood mansion, where they'd found the first photograph, had been built in 1890, 3 years after the sisters' disappearance, by a merchant who had made his fortune importing photographic supplies and chemicals from Europe. "It's a dead end," James sighed, pushing away from his computer. "Not necessarily," Eliza replied, still scrolling through digitized records. "Look at this." She had found a newspaper article from November 1887 reporting on the disappearance. "Mystery continues. Harwood sisters still missing. Charleston authorities remain baffled by the disappearance of the 5 Harwood sisters last month." A new development has emerged, with reports of a strange figure seen near the Harwood estate in the days preceding the incident. Several servants and neighbors described an unusually tall man carrying photographic equipment. Police are seeking this individual for questioning, though some witnesses claim the man's appearance was so distinctive that he would be easily recognized if still in Charleston. The Harwood parents, devastated by the loss of their daughters, have offered a substantial reward of $5,000 in gold for information leading to their return. "The photographer," James said. "It has to be. Jim, but why would no one know him?" Eliza wondered. Photography was still relatively specialized in the 1880s. Practitioners would have been known to each other. She continued searching, expanding her parameters to include unusual disappearances in other cities during the same period. A pattern began to emerge. In Boston, Philadelphia, and Savannah, young women from wealthy families had vanished under mysterious circumstances between 1885 and 1889. In each case, the family had recently commissioned portraits from a new photographer in town. "This is bigger than just the Harwood sisters," Eliza realized, her heart racing. This Blackwood, or whatever his real name was, he moved from city to city. "But what did he want?" James asked. "There were never any ransom demands reported in these cases." Eliza stared at the enhanced photograph, at the unnatural figure reaching for Rebecca Harwood. Maybe it wasn't about money. As evening fell, the research lab emptied except for Eliza and James. They had spread their findings across multiple tables, the diary entries, newspaper clippings, and the enhanced photographs. Something was still missing, some connection they couldn't quite make. "I'm going to get coffee," James said, stretching. "Want some?" Eliza nodded absently, her attention fixed on the latest enhancement of the photograph. The figure behind the sisters seemed to have moved again, its shrouded head now turned directly toward the camera, as if aware of being observed across time. While James was gone, Eliza's phone rang. It was Rebecca Fletcher from the Historical Society. "Dr. Morgan, I'm sorry to call so late, but we've found something I think you should see." Another diary hidden in a compartment beneath the floorboards in Rebecca Harwood's bedroom. "Whose diary?" Eliza asked, suddenly alert. "It appears to belong to Caroline, the eldest sister. The entries are disturbing. Can you come to the house?" Eliza checked her watch. "Nearly 9 p.m. "Now?" "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important," Rebecca insisted. "Some of the entries mention the photographer you were asking about, and there's something else. Photographs we didn't find before." "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Eliza decided. When James returned with coffee, she explained the situation. "You should come too. Bring the enhanced images." The Harwood guest house looked different at night. Floodlights illuminated the exterior for the construction work, casting harsh shadows across the weathered facade. Rebecca Fletcher met them at the door, her expression tense. "Thank you for coming," she said, leading them inside. "We were moving furniture in Rebecca's bedroom when one of the floorboards came loose. The diary was wrapped in oilcloth, perfectly preserved. In what had once been a young girl's bedroom, now empty, save for a few pieces of dust-covered furniture, Rebecca handed Eliza a small leather-bound book. "I've only read a few pages," she admitted, "but it's unsettling." Eliza opened the diary carefully. Caroline Harwood's handwriting was different from her sister's, more precise and controlled, with fewer flourishes. She turned to the first entry dated after the family portrait was taken. July 16th, 1887. Elizabeth is concerned about the photographer, Mr. Blackwood. She claims he watched Rebecca inappropriately. I observed no such behavior, though I find the man's demeanor unsettling. There is something wrong with his proportions. He seems too tall, his arms too long for his frame. Father paid him handsomely for his services, a small fortune in gold coins that seemed to please Mr. Blackwood greatly. Eliza flipped forward several weeks. September 28th, 1887. The portrait has arrived. Father is pleased with the quality, though Mother commented that our expressions seem unnaturally solemn. I cannot look at the image without a sense of dread, though I cannot explain why. Since its arrival, I have dreamed of Mr. Blackwood standing in our garden, watching our windows. Just dreams, I tell myself, nothing more. October 18th, 1887. I can no longer deny what is happening. We are being hunted by something that wears the shape of a man. Rebecca has stopped speaking entirely. Elizabeth has convinced Anne and Margaret that we must flee, and I have reluctantly agreed. Tonight, I returned to the drawing room to look once more at our portrait. What I saw chilled my blood. In the photograph behind us stands Mr. Blackwood, though I know with absolute certainty he was not there when the image was captured. More disturbing still, his position has changed since yesterday, as if he moves closer to us within the confines of the paper. October 21st, 1887. We leave tomorrow night. I have made arrangements for a carriage to take us to the railway station. We will travel north, perhaps as far as Canada. Before we go, I must do what Father refused to consider. The portrait must be destroyed. I believe it is somehow connected to our torment. The house feels different now, as if the walls themselves have thinned, allowing something to press against them from some unimaginable space beyond. I hear movement in rooms I know to be empty. Rebecca screams silently in her sleep, her mouth open but no sound emerging. Tomorrow we will be free of this nightmare. The final entry was dated October 22nd, 1887, the day of their disappearance. October 22nd, 1887. He knows our plans. I found my train tickets moved from their hiding place to lie openly on my dressing table. Elizabeth insists we must still try to leave. I am less certain. I went to destroy the portrait this morning, only to find it changed again. In the image, Mr. Blackwood now stands among us, not behind us, his arm around Rebecca's shoulders. Her face in the photograph is contorted in silent terror. The real Rebecca has not left her bed today, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, tracking something I cannot see. I have decided we must take the portrait with us when we flee. Perhaps distance will weaken its power. I have wrapped it in cloth and will carry it myself. Elizabeth thinks I am mad, that we should burn it instead, but I fear what might be released if we attempt to destroy it. We leave at midnight. God help us all. The diary ended there. Eliza looked up at James and Rebecca, her face pale. "There's more," Rebecca said quietly, handing Eliza a small bundle wrapped in yellowed tissue paper. "We found these with the diary." Eliza unwrapped the bundle carefully. Inside were 5 small photographs, each showing one of the Harwood sisters individually. Unlike the formal portrait, these appeared to be candid images, captured without the subject's knowledge. Each sister was photographed looking afraid, glancing over their shoulders, or staring wide-eyed at something outside the frame. "These aren't typical 19th century photographs," James observed, examining them closely. "The exposure time would have been too long to capture these expressions." "Unless the photographer had more advanced equipment," Eliza suggested. Elizabeth mentioned his camera was unusual. She turned over one of the photographs, the one showing young Rebecca Harwood cowering against a wall. On the back was written, "The first to see, the first to go." A chill ran through the room. Rebecca Fletcher hugged herself, suddenly looking uncomfortable. "There's one more thing," she said hesitantly. "After finding these, I went back to the drawing room where the original portrait would have hung. Behind the wallpaper, which we'd been removing for restoration, we found this." She led them downstairs to the drawing room. A section of faded wallpaper had been stripped away, revealing the plaster wall beneath. Scratched deeply into the plaster were 5 sets of initials: CH, MH, EH, AH, RH. Below them, in larger, more desperate carving, were the words, "He is not in the photograph, he is the photograph." "What does that mean?" James whispered. Eliza's mind raced, connecting the fragments of the mystery, the sister's fear of the portrait, the figure that seemed to move within it, the photographer with his strange camera and unnatural proportions. "The camera," she said suddenly. It wasn't just taking images, it was capturing something else. She pulled out her phone, displaying the latest enhancement of the photograph. The figure of the photographer was now completely visible, standing among the sisters, exactly as Caroline had described in her final diary entry. Rebecca Fletcher gasped. "That wasn't there before. When you showed me earlier today, the figure was barely visible." "The enhancement algorithm keeps revealing more," James explained. "It's as if the image is still developing more than a century later." Eliza stared at the photograph on her phone, then at the individual portraits of the terrified sisters. A horrible suspicion formed in her mind. "We need to go back to the lab," she said urgently. "Right now!" As they rushed to leave, a sudden gust of wind blew through the house, causing doors to slam and loose papers to scatter. The construction lights outside flickered, momentarily plunging the old house into darkness. "What was that?" Rebecca asked, her voice shaking. "Just the wind," James assured her, though he didn't sound convinced. Back at the university lab, Eliza loaded all the images they had collected into the computer. The original formal portrait, the enhanced versions showing the photographer's progressive appearance, and the 5 individual photographs of the sisters. "What are you looking for?" James asked, watching as she worked. "I'm not sure," Eliza admitted. "But Caroline wrote that the photographer wasn't in the photograph. He was the photograph. What if the camera wasn't just a camera? What if it was a trap of some kind?" She ran all the images through the enhancement software simultaneously, pushing the algorithms to their limits. The computer struggled with the processing load, the screen flickering as it worked. "Look at this," she said, pointing to the individual photograph of Rebecca Harwood. The enhancement had revealed something in the background, a shadow that hadn't been visible before, stretching across the wall behind the frightened girl. The shadow didn't match Rebecca's form. Instead, it suggested a tall, thin figure with elongated arms. "He's in all of them," Eliza realized, examining each enhanced image. In every photograph, the same unnatural shadow lurked somewhere in the frame, behind a curtain, stretching across a ceiling, pooling in a corner. "But why?" James asked. "What did he want with them?" Eliza turned back to the main portrait, now enhanced to its maximum clarity. The photographer stood fully revealed among the sisters, one arm around Rebecca's shoulders, his other hand reaching toward the camera lens. His face remained obscured by the camera cloth, but his posture suggested triumph. "I think," Eliza began, her voice faltering, "I think he wanted to preserve them somehow. Not just their images, them." She enlarged the faces of the 5 sisters in the enhanced portrait. Their expressions were no longer the neutral masks typical of Victorian photography. Instead, they showed the same terror captured in the individual photographs, frozen in a moment of realization and horror. "The sisters didn't just disappear," Eliza whispered. "They were taken, absorbed somehow into the photographic process itself." It sounded impossible, yet the evidence before them suggested something beyond rational explanation. The moving figure in the photograph, the sisters' descriptions of being hunted by something inhuman, the final message carved into the wall, "He is not in the photograph, he is the photograph." "And if that's true," James said slowly, "then they might still exist in some form, trapped in these images for over a century." The implications were horrifying. Eliza stared at the 5 terrified faces, wondering if some essence of the Harwood sisters remained conscious within the chemical emulsion of the photographs, aware of each viewing, each enhancement that brought their captor into clearer focus. "We need to stop," she decided suddenly, closing the enhancement program. "We need to stop looking at these images, stop enhancing them." "Why?" James asked, confused. "Because I think that's what he wants," Eliza explained, her voice urgent. "Each time we look, each time we enhance, we're feeding the process somehow, making him stronger, more present." She turned off her computer monitor, suddenly unwilling to look at the images any longer. The Harwoods weren't the only victims. There were others in different cities. What if this entity has been dormant all this time, waiting for someone to find the photographs again? To start the process of manifestation all over again? A cold draft suddenly swept through the lab, stirring papers and causing the lights to flicker. Both researchers looked up, startled. "We should secure these images," Eliza said firmly. "Lock them away where they can't be viewed or processed further." As she gathered the printed photographs, Eliza noticed something that made her blood run cold. In the latest enhancement of the main portrait, where the photographer stood among the sisters, his shrouded head was now turned toward the edge of the frame, toward the viewer. Though his face remained covered, the posture suggested awareness, as if he knew he was being observed across time. And his hand, previously on Rebecca's shoulder, was now extended slightly toward the edge of the photograph, long fingers reaching outward as if trying to breach the boundary between image and reality. "James," Eliza said, her voice barely audible. "Look at this." Her assistant leaned in, his expression changing from curiosity to horror as he noticed the subtle change. "That's not possible," he whispered. "Printed photographs don't change." Yet the evidence was before them. Something was happening to the image, something that defied rational explanation. Outside the lab windows, clouds had gathered, obscuring the moon and stars. The wind had picked up, whistling around the corners of the building. The overhead lights flickered again, longer this time, plunging the lab into momentary darkness before returning to normal. "We need to leave," Eliza decided, gathering the photographs into a folder. "Now." As they hurried to pack up the materials, Eliza's phone chimed with an incoming text message. It was from Rebecca Fletcher. "Coming back to the house. Found something else in the wall. Looks like glass photographic plates. Need your expertise immediately." "She shouldn't be there alone," James said, reading over Eliza's shoulder. Eliza hesitated, torn between her instinct to flee from the photographs and her concern for Rebecca. "We'll bring these with us," she decided, securing the folder of images in her bag. "We can't leave them here, and we can't leave her alone in that house." The storm had intensified by the time they reached the Harwood guest house. Rain lashed against the windows and lightning illuminated the scaffolding surrounding the building, creating strange, elongated shadows across the lawn. Rebecca's car was parked haphazardly in the drive, one wheel on the grass as if she had arrived in a hurry. The front door stood partially open, swinging gently in the wind. "Rebecca!" Eliza called as they entered, her voice swallowed by the sound of rain and thunder. The house was dark, except for a single light burning in what had been Rebecca Harwood's bedroom upstairs. They climbed the creaking staircase, calling out for the historian. In the bedroom, they found Rebecca kneeling on the floor, examining something she had spread on a cloth. She looked up as they entered, her face ghostly in the light of the single lamp. "I found them hidden in the same compartment as the diary," she explained, gesturing to several glass photographic plates laid carefully on the cloth. "They were in a lead box, sealed with wax. I think they're the original negatives for the portraits." Eliza approached cautiously, studying the glass plates without touching them. They were negatives indeed, the images reversed in the classic photographic process of the era. But unlike normal negatives, these seemed to shimmer slightly when viewed from certain angles, as if the images weren't fixed permanently to the glass. "We shouldn't be looking at these," Eliza said, her voice tight. "We need to seal them back up." "Why?" Rebecca asked, confused. "They're historically significant. They could tell us what happened to the sisters. "I think we already know what happened," Eliza replied grimly. She showed Rebecca the enhanced photograph on her phone, now showing the photographer reaching toward the edge of the frame. "And I think it's happening again." As if in response to her words, the lights flickered violently. Outside, lightning struck nearby, illuminating the room in harsh white light before plunging it back into semi-darkness. "We need to leave," James insisted, helping Rebecca to her feet. "Now!" As they turned to go, the bedroom door slammed shut with enough force to shake the walls. The temperature in the room plummeted, their breath suddenly visible in the chilled air. "What's happening?" "It's him," Eliza whispered, her eyes fixed on the door. "He's here." The glass photographic plates on the floor began to vibrate, a soft, humming sound emanating from them. The images on the negatives seemed to shift, the dark areas growing darker, as if absorbing the dim light in the room. "Who's here?" Rebecca demanded, backing away from the plates. "What are you talking about?" James moved to the door, tugging at the handle. "It's stuck," he reported, his voice tight with tension. He threw his shoulder against the wood, but the door remained firmly shut. "Blackwood," Eliza said, opening her bag and removing the folder of photographs. "The photographer, I think he used these sisters somehow, captured them. And now we've been examining the photographs, enhancing them, giving him attention, giving him power." A sudden crash made them all jump. The single lamp in the room had fallen to the floor, its bulb shattering but, impossibly, still emitting light, a cold, blue-white illumination that cast stark shadows across the walls. In that eerie light, Eliza saw something that made her blood freeze. The shadows weren't matching their movements. Instead, they stretched and elongated, reaching across the walls like grasping fingers. "The negatives," she said urgently. "We need to cover them." James quickly removed his jacket, tossing it over the glass plates on the floor. For a moment the humming subsided, and the unnatural shadows receded slightly. "That won't hold for long," Eliza warned. "We need to get out of here." She pulled out her phone, its screen flickering with static. The enhanced photograph was still displayed, but the image had changed again. The photographer's form had moved to the very edge of the frame, his elongated fingers now extending beyond the photograph's border, as if reaching out from the two-dimensional world into their reality. "Oh God!" Rebecca breathed, seeing the impossible image. "This can't be happening." Another crash of lightning illuminated the room, and in that flash they all saw it. A tall, thin shadow standing in the corner, its proportions wrong, its limbs too long. When the lightning faded, the shadow remained, darker than the surrounding darkness. "The window," James suggested, turning away from the door. "We can climb down the scaffolding." He moved to the window, struggling with the old painted-shut sash. After a moment of effort, it gave way with a screech of protesting wood, letting in a gust of cold, rain-laden air. "Go," Eliza urged, pushing Rebecca toward the window. "Quickly." As Rebecca climbed onto the sill, the jacket covering the photographic plates suddenly flew across the room, as if caught in a violent wind. The glass negatives rose into the air, hovering at eye level, rotating slowly. "Don't look at them!" Eliza shouted, but it was too late. Rebecca had turned at the commotion, her eyes widening as she stared at the floating negatives. Her body went rigid, a small gasp escaping her lips as she froze, half in and half out of the window. "Rebecca!" James lunged for her, but stopped short as her skin began to change, taking on a strange silvery sheen in the blue-white light. Before their horrified eyes, Rebecca's form seemed to flatten, her features becoming fixed in an expression of terror as her body lost dimension, compressing into a two-dimensional image of itself. Her outstretched hand, reaching for help, became a flat, silvery silhouette against the window frame. And then she was gone, not fallen, not disappeared, but absorbed somehow into the glass of the window pane, her terrified face now a photographic negative imprinted on the surface, visible only when lightning flashed outside. "Run!" Eliza screamed, shoving James toward the window. "Don't look back!" The tall shadow in the corner had moved, gliding across the room toward them, its form becoming more substantial with each inch it advanced. Eliza could make out the outline of a tall hat, the suggestion of a camera cloth draped over what should have been a head. James scrambled through the window onto the scaffolding outside, rain immediately soaking his shirt. Eliza followed. The folder of photographs clutched tightly to her chest. The wind howled around them, threatening to tear them from the metal framework. "Down!" James shouted over the storm, pointing to a ladder leading to the next level. As they descended, Eliza looked back at the window they had escaped through. Illuminated by another flash of lightning, she saw a figure standing there. Not Rebecca, but a tall, impossibly thin man in Victorian clothes. His face was obscured by shadow, but she could feel his gaze, hungry and patient, following their desperate flight. They reached the ground, splashing through puddles as they ran for James's car. Behind them, every window of the Harwood house blazed with sudden light, as if all the rooms had been illuminated at once. In each window, Eliza thought she could see faces pressed against the glass, the 5 Harwood sisters, and now Rebecca Fletcher, all trapped in a photographic purgatory. "The photographs!" James gasped as they reached his car. "We have to destroy them." "Not here," Eliza insisted, clutching the folder tightly as she slid into the passenger seat. "Not near the house. He's too strong here." James started the engine, the headlights cutting through the darkness as they sped away from the Harwood property. In the rearview mirror, Eliza saw a tall figure standing in the center of the driveway, watching them leave. Though distant now, she could feel his malevolent awareness fixed upon them, upon the photographs she carried. "We need somewhere safe," she said, trying to control her trembling voice. "Somewhere with people, with lights." "The university," James suggested, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "The main library is open all night. There will be students, security guards." Eliza nodded, checking the folder to ensure none of the photographs had been lost in their escape. All were there, the original portrait, the enhanced versions, and the 5 individual images of the sisters. Even now, sealed in the folder, she could feel them like a weight, a cold presence against her chest. The drive to campus took 20 minutes through the storm-lashed streets of Charleston. Neither spoke, both trying to process what they had witnessed. Eliza's mind raced, connecting fragments of the mystery that now seemed horrifyingly clear. The photographer, Blackwood, had used his camera not just to take images, but to capture essences, to trap the Harwood sisters within his photographs. For what purpose, she couldn't guess, but the diaries suggested he had hunted them, stalked them, before finally taking them on that October night in 1887. And now, through their research, through the digital enhancement of his work, they had somehow reactivated the process, allowing Blackwood to reach across time toward new victims. Rebecca Fletcher had already fallen prey to his hunger. They would be next if they couldn't find a way to end this. The university campus was largely deserted due to the late hour and the storm, but as James had predicted, the main library remained open, its windows glowing with warm light. They parked as close as possible and dashed through the rain to the entrance. Inside, the library was quiet but not empty. A few students occupied tables in the main reading room, and a security guard nodded to them from his station near the entrance. Eliza felt some of her tension ease in the bright, normal space. "Let's find a private study room," she suggested, leading James toward the back of the building. They secured a small room with glass walls overlooking the main floor, private enough for conversation, but public enough that they wouldn't be isolated. James locked the door behind them, while Eliza carefully placed the folder on the table. "What happened to Rebecca?" James asked, his voice low. "Did she die?" Eliza shook her head, unsure how to explain what they had witnessed. "I don't think death is the right word. She was captured, absorbed somehow, just like the Harwood sisters, turned into an image, a permanent record. But why? What does Blackwood want? Immortality, maybe, Eliza suggested, staring at the folder without opening it. The diaries mentioned how pleased he was when paid in gold coins. What if it wasn't just about money? What if he sought a different kind of wealth, the youth and vitality of his subjects? James ran a hand through his damp hair. So what do we do? How do we stop him? We need to destroy these photographs, Eliza said firmly. All copies, including the digital ones. We need to erase him from existence. She pulled out her phone, navigating to her email to delete the digital copies she had sent to herself. The screen flickered, static, briefly distorting the image before it cleared. When she opened her email app, the messages containing the photographs were already open, the attachments downloading automatically. No, she muttered, trying to cancel the downloads. The progress bar continued to fill despite her attempts. He's in the system somehow. James was checking his own phone, finding similar interference. It's like he's using the network, spreading himself. A notification sound made them both jump. Eliza's phone had received a text message from an unknown number. The message contained only 5 words. I see you. Thank you. Ooh. As if in response, the lights in the library flickered, momentarily plunging the building into darkness before the emergency systems kicked in, bathing everything in a dim, reddish glow. We need to burn the physical copies, Eliza decided, reaching for the folder. Now! She opened it carefully, spreading the photographs on the table. In the emergency lighting, the images seemed more alive somehow. The silver halides in the emulsion catching the red light with an unnatural gleam. The main portrait had changed again. The photographer no longer stood among the sisters. Instead, they were alone in the frame, their faces masks of terror as they stared at something beyond the camera. Behind them, the drawing-room wall now bore a shadow, a tall, thin shadow falling across the sisters, cast by someone standing where the camera would have been. He's not in the photograph anymore, James whispered. He's behind the camera. He's looking at us, Eliza finished, just as we're looking at them. The security camera in the corner of the study room whirred, its lens adjusting as it panned toward them. On the table, her phone's screen lit up unbidden, the camera app activating itself, the lens pointing at the spread photographs. We need fire, Eliza said urgently, gathering the photographs back into the folder. Matches? A lighter? Anything. James patted his pockets, finding nothing. There might be something in the chemistry labs, Bunsen burners at least. They left the study room, hurrying through the dimly lit library. The few students who had been studying were now gathered near the security desk, concerned about the power fluctuation. The guard was on his radio, reporting the issue to campus facilities. This way, James directed, leading Eliza toward a side exit that would take them to the science building across the quad. Outside, the storm had intensified. Rain fell in sheets, and the wind howled between the buildings. Lightning illuminated the campus in stark relief, casting long shadows that seemed to move independently of the objects creating them. They ran across the open space, the folder protected inside Eliza's jacket. The science building loomed ahead, its windows dark except for the emergency exit signs glowing red through the rain. James swiped his ID card at the entrance, but the electronic lock remained engaged. Power must be out here too, he realized, trying again without success. There has to be another way in, Eliza insisted, looking around desperately. A flash of lightning revealed a figure standing at the far end of the quad, tall and thin, motionless despite the raging wind. When darkness returned, the figure was gone, but Eliza knew it was approaching, moving between the moments of illumination. There, James pointed to a basement entrance, partially protected from the rain by an overhang. The geology lab. My friend works there. She gave me the key code last semester when I needed to borrow equipment. They splashed through puddles to reach the entrance. James punched in a 4-digit code on the mechanical keypad, and the door unlocked with a solid click. They slipped inside, finding themselves in a dim corridor, lit only by emergency lights. "The lab should be this way," James said, leading Eliza deeper into the building. "They have acetylene torches for rock cutting. That should be hot enough to destroy the photographs completely." The geology lab was deserted, workbenches cluttered with rock samples and equipment. James moved confidently to a cabinet at the back, extracting a handheld torch and a striker. "Put them on that metal tray," he instructed, nodding toward a steel specimen tray on one of the benches. Eliza removed the photographs from the folder, arranging them in the tray. The images seemed to shimmer in the emergency lighting, as if the figures within were moving slightly, trapped in their two-dimensional prison. "All of them," James reminded her. "We can't risk leaving any." She nodded, adding the final photograph, the original portrait that had started their investigation. As she placed it in the tray, she noticed something that made her breath catch. In the portrait, the 5 Harwood sisters now stood in different positions, their arrangement changed from the original. They were backing away from the camera, their faces contorted in terror, arms raised as if to shield themselves from something approaching. "James, look!" Before she could finish, the emergency lights went out, plunging the lab into total darkness. The only illumination came from occasional flashes of lightning through the high basement windows, casting bizarre shadows across the laboratory equipment. "The torch," Eliza urged, her voice tight with fear. "Light it now." In the darkness, she heard James fumbling with the equipment, the click of the striker once, twice, 3 times without success. Finally, a blue flame sputtered to life, casting a small circle of wavering light around them. "Hold it steady," Eliza said, pushing the tray closer to him. "Burn them all." James adjusted the torch, the flame growing stronger. He lowered it toward the photographs, the heat already causing the edges of the paper to curl. A sudden cold draft swept through the lab, making the flame waver. The basement windows rattled in their frames, and somewhere in the darkness, glass shattered. "Hurry," Eliza whispered, watching the doorway to the lab where shadows seemed to be gathering, deepening beyond what the absence of light could explain. The first photograph, one of the individual portraits of the youngest sister, caught fire, the paper blackening and curling as flames consumed the image. As it burned, Eliza thought she heard a faint, high-pitched sound, like a distant scream. The fire spread to the second photograph, then the third. Each ignition was accompanied by that same eerie sound, growing louder, more desperate. The metal tray grew hot, the photographs within reduced to ash and embers. Finally, only the main portrait remained, partially protected from the flames by the ashes of the other photographs. James adjusted the torch, directing the flame directly onto the image. The portrait resisted the fire longer than the others had, the paper blackening but not immediately catching flame. In the wavering torchlight, Eliza could see the image changing one final time. The sisters now pressed against the edges of the frame, as if trying to escape the advancing shadow that filled the center of the photograph. With a sudden whoosh, the portrait finally ignited, flames consuming the paper rapidly. The screaming sound reached a crescendo, not distant anymore, but filling the lab, reverberating from the walls and ceiling. The windows exploded inward, showering them with glass as a gust of wind extinguished the torch and scattered the burning ashes across the floor. In the darkness, illuminated only by the dying embers and flashes of lightning, a figure stood in the doorway, impossibly tall, impossibly thin, its proportions a mockery of human form. "Run!" James shouted, grabbing Eliza's arm and pulling her toward a side door she hadn't noticed before. They burst through into another corridor, running blindly in the darkness. Behind them, something moved, not running but gliding with unnatural speed, closing the distance with each passing second. "Here!" James yanked open a door, revealing a narrow stairwell. They climbed rapidly, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. Below, something scraped against the stairs, a slow, deliberate sound like metal on stone. They emerged on the ground floor, in a wide hallway lined with classroom doors. Emergency lights provided minimal illumination, enough to navigate by but little more. Outside the windows, lightning continued to flash, briefly illuminating the corridor in stark white light before returning it to shadow. "Did we get them all?" James gasped, pausing to catch his breath. "All the photographs?" Eliza nodded, though uncertainty gnawed at her. "I think so, but there are still the digital copies, and whatever is in the Harwood house, the glass negatives." A door slammed somewhere in the building, the sound echoing through the empty corridors. Then another, closer this time, and another, as if something was moving through the building, testing each room, searching for them. "We need to keep moving," James urged, taking Eliza's hand. "If we can make it to the main campus security office, we'll be safe." They continued down the corridor, trying to stay quiet, despite their haste. Eliza's mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. If Blackwood was some kind of entity that existed within and through photographs, then burning the physical copies might have weakened him, but not destroyed him completely. The digital images remained, scattered across their devices and university servers. And there were the glass negatives still at the Harwood house, possibly the original source of his power.